Scattered across the world are monoliths, stone giants whose existence neither history nor geology explains. They stand in deserts, on the ocean floor, in mountains, and even on other planets. Their creators are unknown, their purpose forgotten, and their silence is more disturbing than any legend. Monolith Olgoikorkoi. Amid the cold Mongolian steppes, where the wind draws long shadows across the land and blurs the boundaries of time, stands a stone giant known to locals as Olgoikorkoi. It looks as if it has grown out of the earth, but the longer you examine it, the more you notice its deliberate lines and strange, strict symmetry. Its size seems disproportionate to the empty plain, as if someone had placed a stone marker here, intended to be seen from above rather than from below. Many nomads claim that this monolith is older than any steppe legends and appeared long before the first tribes crossed these lands at the beginning of the distant first millennium BC. But no written evidence of its creation has ever been found. The stone's surface is covered with shallow grooves that look neither like watermarks nor natural cracks. They run almost parallel, as if someone wanted to emphasize the vertical and marked direction. Some researchers believe these lines to be part of the natural decay of the rock, but the precise spacing raised doubts and drew attention to ancient tales of stone pillars marking the paths of spirits. There are no traces of ancient settlements or signs of ritual sites around the monolith, although such objects are usually associated with rituals. It stands alone, as if deliberately placed in a spot where nothing distracts from its silence. Even the nearest hills are so distant that the night completely engulfs the horizon, leaving the monolith the only vertical object for many kilometers. When they first attempted to measure its tilt, it became clear that it stood almost perfectly level, without any shifting, highly unusual for a stone that, according to locals, has no foundation and appears to have been simply planted in the steppe. This gave rise to the long-standing hypothesis that a larger portion of the structure, possibly many times larger than what's visible, may be hidden underground. The strangest thing is the alignment of the monolith with the direction of sunrise at the height of the summer solstice. Of course, such a phenomenon could have been coincidental, but the precision of the coincidence seems too high. Local elders believe that this stone ushers in summer, and that its shadow should guide those traveling to distant pastures. But no one knows whether this tradition is ancient or a more recent one. There's another version. According to ancient legends, the monolith served as a boundary stone between worlds, erected not by humans, but by powers that predated humanity. These stories have been passed down for centuries, but each teller added their own details, so no account is considered definitive. However, all the legends agree on one thing. This stone was never part of a human construction. Today, Olgoikorkoi stands as it did thousands of years ago. The wind polishes its surface, snow slides down its edges, and the sun repeats its unbroken cycle each year. And the longer the monolith resists time, the more the feeling grows that its purpose has yet to be revealed. It seems to wait, remaining the sole witness to an ancient plan forgotten by all but the steppe itself. Monkey Mound Monolith. When explorers first saw the rocky outcrop rising above the forests of the southern lands of what is now the United States, they assumed it was an ordinary hill. Only many years later did it become clear that something quite different lay beneath the soft green surface. Monkey Mound turned out to be a monolith, its size and shape inconsistent with either natural processes or the known ancient traditions of the peoples of these lands. The soil here is soft and prone to crumbling, so any natural protrusion loses its shape over time. But at Monkey Mound, the lines were stable, as if someone had once carved this place into its desired shape and secured it for centuries. From above, one can see how the stone structure has almost precise boundaries extending deep into the earth, as if this boulder were part of a larger massif that once rose much higher above the ground. When researchers last century attempted to measure the slope's angle and the shape of the upper platform, they found them too perfect to be the work of nature. The slope followed the same curvature, as if it were the mark of a huge tool. Such coincidences are usually explained by ancient earthworks, but even the most experienced archaeologists could not identify a single culture that would have left such a monumental trace in these places. Locals told ancient legends about a stone beast that once stood above the dense forest, watching over all the tribes crossing the valleys in search of game. This beast was said to be enormous, with a strange curve to its back, and to hold its head low, as if peering into the ground. This is how the name Monkey Mound originated, although no tale explained why it should be associated with the image of a beast. There are reports from the mid-19th century of travelers noticing isolated stone protrusions on the hilltop, resembling supports or the remains of ancient structures. However, only scattered traces remain today, unable to be associated with either dwellings or ritual structures. The strangest thing is that the structure within the hill sounded hollow, as if there were undiscovered cavities, although no researcher has been able to obtain precise data due to the threat of slope collapse. Proponents of Monkey Mound's natural origin claimed it was simply part of a rocky foundation, covered by millennia of sediment and vegetation. However, those who saw the structure up close reported that in some places, horizontal lines could be seen that did not resemble natural layers. They were too evenly spaced to coincide with the overall shape of the protrusion and resembled traces of surface smoothing. Even more bizarre was the coincidence of Monkey Mound's position with the sun's direction at two key times of the year. On the longest day, the shadow from the protrusion extends toward the old riverbed, while on the shortest day, the shadow points to the site where archaeologists found traces of ancient settlements. This alignment is difficult to explain by chance, especially in a region where no one has ever created sun markers of such magnitude. Some researchers believed that the Monkey Mound may be part of an ancient stone complex, completely hidden by subsequent layers of earth. It may have been a sky observation platform, created long before the arrival of known tribes, but such structures would have required an organized culture, which historians have not yet found in these areas. This has led to the bold hypothesis that the monolith may have been abandoned before the region was settled by people who arrived after the glaciers retreated. There's a tribal legend dating back to the distant 8th century AD. It speaks of the stone back of a great guardian who slept in the earth, waiting for people to stop fearing the darkness. Perhaps this is a simple poetic metaphor, but the image in the old ornament does indeed resemble an elongated hill with a head-like protrusion. It's as if, in the minds of the ancient inhabitants, this monolith was not just part of the landscape, but a special object. When they began clearing small areas of the surface, they discovered a structure of harder stone beneath the soil than that found in this area. Its origin could not be explained, as such rock is usually found much further south. How it could have ended up here, no one knows. If humans brought it here, it would have been a tremendous undertaking, requiring extraordinary strength and many people. However, this assumption is questionable due to the lack of evidence of settlements nearby. Proponents of mystical theories believe that Monkey Mound was part of something larger, perhaps a vast structure concealed by the earth. Such theories are rarely taken seriously, but in this case, the lack of any written evidence and the unusual shape of the monolith make it difficult to verify traditional explanations. Even modern research methods don't provide definitive answers, as any excavation could destroy the natural cover that prevents potential landslides. Today, Monkey Mound remains a silent stone giant, towering above the forest, as if contemplating something ancient. At its summit, only the wind can be heard, and below, among the roots, lie mysteries that have never been revealed. Perhaps, with time, the earth will give way, and the hidden layers will emerge, but for now, the monolith lives its own life, remaining one of the continent's most mysterious stone formations. Batabek Monolith. In southern Kazakhstan, amid the vast steppes, where the horizon dissolves in a hot haze and seems infinitely distant, stands the Batabek Monolith, a huge vertical slab whose smooth edges bewilder anyone who sees it for the first time. It seems to have been carved from the earth with a single stroke of an invisible instrument, leaving an impression of alienness that is perceptible even from a distance. Coming closer, you can see that the monolith's surface is almost completely free of natural cracks, although the steppe heat and winter frost should have long since destroyed the stone. The surprisingly even vertical surface creates the feeling that before you is not a natural boulder, but an ancient stone marker, deliberately placed as if to convey an important message to those who will pass by in the distant future. Many locals believe the monolith was erected by people who lived here long before the first nomadic tribes arrived. However, no written records, no legends, no mention of its creation survive. It seems the stone has stood here since a time when there was no steppe around it, and the land looked different, perhaps even part of a different landscape. What's also interesting is that the monolith is oriented almost perfectly along the north-south axis. The deviation is so small that experienced researchers couldn't explain such precision as mere coincidence. Furthermore, There are no burial mounds, ancient settlements, or traces of stonework nearby, meaning there could not have been structures associated with celestial observation. Yet the monolith still follows a direction important to those who knew how to track the movement of the sun and stars. Some researchers in the last century noted that Baadebeek stands at the foot of a hill where pottery fragments and stone tools have been found at various times. However, not a single find has been directly linked to the monolith. This creates the impression that it is older than all the objects discovered so far, and belongs to an era when people lived in small groups and were just beginning to explore the world around them. But could such a people have created such a smooth, vertical slab? The most mysterious part remains its lower section. It extends so deep into the ground that excavation attempts inevitably failed due to the dense soil, which threatened to collapse on the workers. One of the oldest researchers wrote that the monolith may have a subterranean section several times greater than its visible height. If so, the object may not be a slab, but the top of a huge stone pillar, hidden beneath a layer of earth formed over thousands of years. There's another observation. On the western side of the monolith, barely noticeable diagonal lines are visible, as if someone had drawn a long, sharp tool across the stone. The depth of the grooves is uniform throughout, which is extremely difficult to explain by a natural process. The rock in this region is subject to wind erosion, but wind rarely leaves such smooth lines, and especially not always on the same side. An old story has survived among the steppe people about a stone door that only a select few could open. It tells of a strange light that would appear near the monolith during the longest days of summer. Of course, this could simply be the refraction of sunlight, but the legend matches the orientation of the stone remarkably well. Perhaps the ancient people truly perceived it as part of a ritual associated with the sun and time. In the early 20th century, several researchers attempted to determine the stone's origin based on its composition. However, the results were unexpected. The monolith was composed of a material extremely rare in the area. The nearest outcrops of similar rock are several dozen kilometers away. If the stone had indeed been brought in by humans, it would have required an incredible amount of effort and expense, especially given the monolith's size. There have been attempts to suggest that the monolith is part of a long-eroded mountain range, of which nothing remains. But an examination of the adjacent slopes has not confirmed this theory. No natural formation around resembles the stone standing alone in the steppe. It seems as if it appeared here of its own accord, an object not belonging to the surrounding world, yet somehow connected to it by some incomprehensible law. The Baadebeek monolith also attracted the attention of researchers because its shadow, at certain times of the year, pointed to the old riverbed, which had long since dried up. This connection seems odd, as the riverbed could have changed over time. However, it's possible the stone was erected precisely during a period when water played an important role in the lives of the people of this region. If so, the monolith could be one of the oldest wayfinding markers in Central Asia. Today, the monolith stands in the same spot, as if awaiting the moment when someone will unravel its true purpose. It seems to be part of an ancient system, destroyed by time and hidden by layers of earth. Perhaps other stones stood nearby, forming a circle or a line. Perhaps there were rituals associated with its shadow, but all of this has disappeared, leaving only a solitary vertical stone in the steppe. And the longer it stands, the more it seems that Baadebeek is not just a stone slab, but a witness to an era we know nothing about. It's like a mirror, reflecting the past, but concealing its most important features. And everyone who approaches it feels the same. Before you is not just a stone, but a part of something greater. Something that could one day change the lives of the people who left this mark in the steppe. Sinka Stone Forest. Deep in the island's interior, where the mist rises so slowly, as if pondering every movement, lies a place that is difficult to compare to anywhere else in the world. The Singa Stone Forest is not just a maze of stone, but a space where the very earth seems to have been transformed into pointed towers, so densely packed that even light barely filters between them. At first glance, it appears to be a natural formation, sculpted by time and wind. But the deeper one penetrates this stone world, the more one begins to sense the strangeness of the forms. They appear too even, too repetitive, as if designed with a specific rhythm. It feels as if someone ancient used the stone as a material to create a vast, frozen garden. Most of the ledges are of uniform height, although natural processes tend to create chaos rather than order. Narrow corridors run between the sharp ridges, some so tight that a person passes sideways, almost touching the stone. And each such passage creates the feeling that a will is present within the stone, guiding the invisible traveler in the right direction. The most unusual thing about Singire is its verticality. The stone spires rise to heights of several dozen meters, but the bases of most of them are narrow and fragile in appearance. However, even the strong winds common in this area cannot move them. It seems as if each spire contains a hidden structure capable of holding the slender stone trunk on the brink of collapse. Locals avoid the forest's deepest reaches. They believe Singai is home to ancient spirits who brook no interference. Legend has it that people in the past attempted to pass through this stone forest, but those who ventured too far never returned. This wasn't because they got lost, but because the stone blocked the exit, altering the space and leading the traveler deeper into themselves. Researchers in the last century attempted to explain the forest's origins, believing it to be the result of surface erosion by underground streams. But even those who supported this theory acknowledged that the uniformity of the spire's shapes remains a mystery. Some of them look as if their tops were once broken off by a single, violent movement, but no traces of fallen fragments have been found anywhere. Among the stones are small, perfectly flat areas. They appear to have been smoothed and polished by human hands, but no traces of labor, tools, or settlements have been found nearby. These areas occur in specific locations, as if forming an invisible system of landmarks, possibly linked to ancient paths or ritual routes forgotten as far back as the first millennium BC. Some scientists have noted that Singi interacts with sound in an unusual way. Any whisper spoken near the narrow passage is amplified, as if the stone were acting as a conductor. Wind, passing between the sharp spires, creates a strange hum, sometimes reminiscent of voices or breathing. Because of this, locals believe the forest speaks to those who know how to listen. There's a story about an old tracker who ventured deep into the forest at the end of the 19th century. He reported seeing stone pillars arranged in a circle inside, but when he returned with others, the circle had disappeared. Perhaps it was simply an effect of light and shadow, but his story sparked the idea that Singa's heart might conceal forms visible only at certain times of day. The most disturbing aspect remains the fact that some of the spires appear to have been worked. Several of them have long, straight stripes running vertically across their surface, appearing as smooth as if carved with a huge knife. Nature rarely creates such lines, but there's no explanation yet. This has led to the theory that the stone forest may not only be natural, but also partially modified by someone whose knowledge was lost long before the rise of known civilizations. Researchers have speculated that Singi may be an ancient sacred space where people observed the sun or stars. Some of the spire's tops align with the direction of sunrise and sunset on the equinoxes. However, no one can prove whether this was intentional or just a coincidence in the enormous stone massif. Despite attempts to map the forest, the exact maps constantly vary. The stone corridors seem to shift, complicating the path for those walking without a guide. This creates the impression of a living space that refuses to submit to human control. And the more time one spends among these spires, the more one feels the looming presence of something ancient. Today, the Singa Stone Forest remains one of the most inaccessible and least studied monolithic areas in the world. It seems to stand on the border between two worlds, the human world and the one that existed here long before humans. And every sharp stone trunk rising above the ground reminds us that not all mysteries can be explained by reason. Some must simply be accepted and observed until time reveals their true meaning. Itaburo Monolith. Hidden deep in the Brazilian wilderness, where the humid air rises like a thick haze, lies the Itaburo Monolith, a stone structure that looks as if it doesn't belong in the rainforest. Locals call it the sleeping trunk. Though there's nothing woody about it, its smooth edges seem chiseled by a hand capable of working stone in ways modern craftsmen sometimes can't imagine. From a distance, the monolith appears to resemble a huge rectangular block lying amid dense foliage. But closer inspection reveals its proportions to be too precise to be a natural formation. The angle between the faces is almost perpendicular, and the surface features long, barely noticeable stripes, as if the stone had once been worked with large tools, leaving marks of uniform depth. The forest around the monolith grows like a dense wall, but near Itaburo itself, the trees seem to avoid it, forming a natural circle. Some researchers believe the soil composition is to blame, but locals are convinced it's the very nature of the stone, which doesn't accept roots. They tell stories about the monolith being older than the forest and that no one knows who placed it here, deep in the inaccessible lands. Itaburo's location seems particularly odd. It lies almost exactly on an east-west axis, as if it once served as a landmark or part of a larger system. However, there are no ruins or traces of ancient settlements nearby. If people were nearby, they left nothing behind except small pieces of pottery found a few hundred paces away. But none of these objects are directly connected to the monolith. Some researchers have attempted to explain its shape by natural erosion, but the stone is too hard and its edges appear too neat. Even if wind and water could weaken the structure, the object would not have become so symmetrical and even, especially given the humid climate, which typically erodes stone unevenly, creating depressions and cavities. One of the oldest legends associated with Itaburo tells of a people who lived here long before the arrival of known tribes. The legend claims that these people could move stone effortlessly, using knowledge lost centuries ago. They are credited with building monoliths reminiscent of Itaburo, but no traces of their existence have been found. Perhaps this is just a myth, born of fear of the unusual shapes of the stone. In the mid-19th century, a European traveler noted in his diary that Itaburo lies so still that it gives the impression of a sleeping beast. He wrote that the stone seemed to possess an inner strength that belies its stillness. According to the same traveler, the monolith appeared brighter at night than during the day, although this was likely simply a reflection of moonlight. Attempts were made to measure the monolith's depth, but each time the work was stopped by dense roots that penetrate the surrounding soil but never touch the stone itself. This surprising observation gave rise to the hypothesis that Itaburo may be part of a structure hidden underground. If so, the monolith is merely the apex, and another, possibly much larger, structure may lie beneath. Occasionally, small, rounded depressions can be seen on the surface of Itaburo. They appear to be arranged in a specific pattern. Attempts to explain them by natural means have been unsuccessful. Such uniform and even depressions are rare in rock without human intervention. Some believe these are traces of bracing used to hold the monolith upright before it fell. However, there is no evidence that it was ever upright. There's a theory that the monolith was part of an ancient stone framework that time has destroyed or consumed. But if there were other structures nearby, they've vanished completely. The tropical forest quickly absorbs any human activity, leaving only hints. Perhaps Itaburo survived this fate thanks to its mass and solidity, while everything else vanished without a trace. It's also interesting that the monolith is located at the intersection of two natural underground streams, which converge beneath it, as confirmed by local residents. This explains the rare moisture in the soil around the stone, but it doesn't explain why such a seemingly artificial object would be located in such a place. Those who believe in the sacred significance of Itaburo are certain that it was placed there intentionally as a power point or part of a ritual space. At the beginning of the 20th century, one explorer noted that when standing near the monolith, a slight vibration was felt, as if the stone were responding to his presence. Perhaps this was a figment of his imagination, but similar claims were made later. Some travelers claimed that the stone seemed to sing at certain times of the year, emitting a deep, barely perceptible sound. Itaburo remains a mystery, hidden amidst the greenery. It tells no story, shows no traces of labor, and explains no purpose. But the more one studies it, the stronger the feeling that this is not just a stone, but a piece of ancient knowledge that has survived the ages. And perhaps one day the forest will reveal the secret hidden beneath its roots, revealing that the monolith was only the beginning of a forgotten story. Monolith of the Archean Plateau. Hidden in the vast southern lands, where the steppe spreads low and seems endless, lies the monolith of the Archean Plateau, a stone pillar whose origins remain elusive to historians and scholars of ancient cultures. It stands alone among the hills, like a forgotten guardian left by someone who lived here long before the first settlements appeared in these parts in the distant 2nd millennium BC. At first glance, the monolith appears to be a natural part of the rock, but the longer one observes its shape, the more one senses that it is not accidental. Its elongated vertical line is too precise, and its surface bears traces, as if the stone had been worked, although this land has no traditions associated with the construction of such structures. Even the nomads, who left behind many legends, never created such forms. The flat surface of the eastern side is particularly striking. It's almost smooth, though the steppe wind must have eroded the stone over centuries, leaving deep cracks. but the surface appears to be no more than a few decades old, even though, by all indications, the monolith predates most cultures that have left their mark on these lands. This discrepancy has long baffled anyone attempting to connect the stone to any known period. Its location is also interesting. The stone stands in a line that aligns with the direction of sunrise on the longest day of the year. This coincidence seems too precise to be considered accidental. Some researchers speculate that the monolith was part of an ancient observation complex, but no other stones have been found nearby. It stands alone, as if designed to mark the moment when the sun reaches its highest point. Sometimes at dawn, the light falls on the monolith's surface as if the stone comes alive. Its surface begins to reflect a soft glow, creating the sensation of an inner energy. Locals say that on such days the monolith breathes, though this is likely just a play of light and shadow. But if you gaze at it long enough, you may indeed see the stone shifting in tone, sometimes becoming lighter, sometimes darker. Steppe legends tell of a tribe that arrived here in ancient times, when the sun still moved differently. According to these stories, they saw the monolith as a sacred sign, helping them determine the season of transition. Perhaps this is simply a beautiful tale, but what's remarkable is how precisely it matches the orientation of the stone. This coincidence makes one wonder whether the ancient inhabitants knew more than we can imagine. An old legend persists that the monolith contains a narrow channel leading deep into the earth. However, attempts to verify this story have always ended in failure. Striking the stone produced a dull ringing sound, as if there really was a cavity within, but no holes or cracks were found. The sound only reinforced the impression that the monolith was not solid and that its shape concealed its internal structure. There's also a theory that the monolith is part of a long-vanished structure, perhaps standing on this spot several millennia ago. But the steppe doesn't preserve ruins. The earth absorbs weak stone, the wind carries away sand, and rain erases traces. If there were other structures nearby, they could have vanished completely, leaving only one, the strongest, the tallest, the most resilient. In the mid-19th century, a traveler wrote of seeing strange markings on the monolith's surface, resembling embossed symbols, but these traces have disappeared today, if they ever existed. Perhaps the observer saw natural cracks, which have diminished over time due to the accumulation of a thin layer of dust. Or perhaps these markings were indeed there, but have been erased by the passage of time. The stone chips found at the base of the monolith are also of interest. They differ in structure from the main mass of the pillar, as if they were formed not naturally, but by processing. However, the origin of these chips remains unclear. They could be traces of the work of an ancient craftsman, but there is no confirmation. The only thing that is clear is that they do not resemble the remains of a simple rock fragment. Observations over the past decades have revealed another oddity. On some summer nights, the stone's temperature is higher than the air temperature, although during the day it doesn't get any hotter than the surrounding ground. No one can explain where this heat comes from. Perhaps the stone accumulates solar energy differently than other rocks. Or perhaps it's due to underground streams, which locals describe as living threads of the earth. The most mysterious feeling remains the one experiences near the monolith. Even those who are not inclined to believe the legends have noted a strange heaviness, as if the space around the stone is filled with an invisible force. Some feel a slight pressure, others a quiet, unsettling response, as if the monolith isn't just standing there, but observing. This may simply be a reaction to the stone's solitude, but the sensation remains. Today, the Arcane Plateau monolith remains one of the most incomprehensible objects in the steppe. It preserves the memory of a past hidden by the veil of time, and perhaps one day it will become clear whether it was part of ancient knowledge or merely a natural joke. But for now, the monolith stands alone, as if continuing to follow the path of the sun and guard a secret that has survived the centuries. Uluru Monolith. Amidst the silent Australian landscape, where the red sand seems like an endless ocean, rises one of the world's most majestic monoliths, Uluru. It doesn't just stand in the desert, it dominates it, like an ancient giant that once rose from the depths of the earth and stood frozen, watching the centuries pass. Even the first glance evokes the feeling that the stone has an inner life of its own. Its surface is covered with long, vertical lines, reminiscent of rain marks, although precipitation is rare in these areas. Many travelers have noted that the lines appear so smooth, as if someone had traced the stone with enormous hands, leaving furrows of uniform shape and rhythm. This creates the impression that the monolith's surface is not simply the result of wind action, but part of a design whose meaning remains unknown. Sunrise transforms Uluru into a vast pillar of fire. The stone shifts hues from deep crimson to vibrant orange, creating a seemingly unreal scene. Locals say the monolith breathes light. This phrase accurately conveys the sensation that the stone truly comes to life, absorbing the first rays of day and releasing them back, transforming the surrounding desert into a space filled with a strange glow. Uluru's greatest mystery lies in its solitude. It stands alone, without any nearby mountain ranges, no traces of eroded hills or other outcrops of rock. It seems as if the monolith didn't emerge from the earth, but was moved or lifted from the depths. Geologists speculate that the stone is connected to ancient rock beneath the surface, but even they admit that such structures don't usually emerge so sharply, creating the impression of a vast, solitary giant. According to legends of the peoples who lived here long before the arrival of Europeans, the monolith was a place where the land remembered its past. It was said that the stone held stories that could not be spoken aloud. Some tribes believed that Uluru was the footprint of a great being who moved across the earth in a very distant time. These stories are impossible to verify, but the way they describe the movement of light on the stone's surface remarkably matches what travelers see. Legend has it that the monolith contains cavities connected by narrow passages leading deep below. Some researchers have attempted to verify this theory by listening to the sound of impacts, but the results have always been mixed. At times, the stone would sound hollow, as if completely solid, while at others, it would seem as if there were genuine voids within. This created the impression that the monolith changed depending on the time of day or season. The southern side of Uluru deserves special attention. It features smooth depressions, positioned as if intentionally. They form lines converging at a precise angle. Some believe these are traces of ancient water flows, but such precision is rare in natural formations. Locals are certain these are traces of ancient knowledge lost many centuries ago. One ancient story says that during the longest days of the year, Uluru's shadow pointed to a place where the earth revealed its secrets. Researchers tried to determine whether this referred to a specific point in the desert, but found nothing special there. Still, the coincidence of the shadow's direction with an old ritual route suggests that the stone may have served as a landmark in a long-vanished culture. The northern side of the monolith is filled with natural depressions, sometimes resembling faces or figures. Many people who have observed them at sunset have reported that they change depending on the angle of the light. These changes may simply be a play of shadows, but the recurrence of the effect has given rise to numerous legends of spirits watching over the desert. Some travelers claim to have seen silhouettes of animals on the surface, long since extinct in these lands. Uluru is also known for a strange sound effect. If you stand near one of its hollows and speak in a low voice, the sound travels deep into the rock and returns as a barely audible echo, as if the stone were speaking. Sometimes the echo seems excessively delayed, as if the sound were traveling a long path inside the monolith and emerging much later. This has led to speculation that there is a complex network of voids within, but no evidence has yet been found. The most perplexing thing is the monolith's presence in the stories of different tribes living far apart. All the legends agree on one thing: Uluru is not just a stone, but a place of power. One story says the monolith saw the emergence of the first humans. Another says it was erected by ancient beings who came from distant mountains. Geologists reject these ideas, but such coincidences cannot help but raise questions. There's also a mid-19th century account recorded by a traveler. He claimed to have seen the stone emanate a dim light at night. It could have been moonlight, but the observation aligns with local accounts of the monolith's own glow on certain nights. Perhaps this is a normal reflection, but why it only appears occasionally remains a mystery. Despite the lack of direct evidence of human intervention, everything about Uluru creates a sense of artificiality. Its shape seems too perfect, its lines too deliberate, its behavior under the light too suggestive. One gets the impression that before one is not simply a natural object, but part of an ancient structure whose meaning has long been lost. Today, the monolith remains a symbol of mystery and a reminder that the earth holds stories that are currently beyond our comprehension. It stands in the desert like a vast red sentinel, enduring the ages, and every sunrise reveals that this stone continues to live its own life, Perhaps one day the desert will reveal more, but for now, Uluru remains a silent stone, whose mystery only deepens with each passing year. Sitting Stone of Issyk-Kul. On the northern shore of Lake Issyk-Kul's dark waters, where the mountains rise so high their peaks seem to dissolve into the clouds, stands a boulder known as the Sitting Stone. It appears to be an ordinary boulder until one approaches closer and sees that its shape is too smooth, too calm, and too deliberate for an object that supposedly arose here naturally. It seems to have been placed at the boundary between water and land, marking the point where the land enters into conversation with the lake. The sessile stone appears to be partially hidden beneath the surface, the visible portion merely the tip of a vast structure extending deep into the earth. The stone's surface is almost entirely free of cracks, despite the harsh climate here. Strong winds, cold winters, and frequent temperature fluctuations should have long since destroyed it. Yet it stands motionless, as if not subject to the same laws as the surrounding boulders, which are covered in cracks and the marks of time. The stone's most unusual feature is its perfectly horizontal surface. It's so smooth that it appears polished. Locals call it the saddle, believing it once served as a site for rituals involving water, although no legend indicates who exactly might have performed such rituals. Some claim the top of the stone glows on certain nights, creating a faint but persistent glow that fades with the first breeze. Elders told stories that in ancient times, even before the first settlements, the stone served as a gateway to the underwater world. It was said that beneath it lay a passage leading to an ancient structure that once rose above the surface. Such stories are unproven, but the remarkable shape of the stone's lower part has left many wondering, why does it stand so firmly in a place where most boulders would have long since sunk into the soft soil? When researchers attempted to determine the stone's depth, their work quickly stalled. The surrounding soil is too dense and viscous, and closer to the water, it's saturated with minerals that change structure every season. But even limited attempts revealed that the stone descends as a single monolithic form, not as part of the eroded cliff face. This means it was placed there intentionally, or at least arrived there unnaturally. Particularly unusual are the lines running along the side of the stone. They don't look like cracks formed by time. Rather, they are shallow grooves, located almost parallel to each other. Their shape and direction create the impression that someone has drawn across the stone with a broad tool, leaving marks that have not faded despite centuries of exposure to the open air. These grooves are remarkably smooth, as if they were created with a design whose meaning has long been lost. It has been suggested that the Sitting Stone may have been part of an ancient navigation system linked to the movement of water and the sun. During the summer solstice, the stone's shadow falls precisely toward a small protrusion on the other side of the shore. This may be a coincidence, but the precision of the shadow, repeating year after year, raises the question of whether the stone was part of an ancient calendar, created long before the advent of written culture in this region. Local legends note that the stone possesses a heavy silence. People sitting on its flat surface reported feeling a strange pressure, as if the space around them was becoming denser and more compact. Sometimes a slight humming sound was heard, inaudible but felt by the body. Researchers attribute this to the properties of the soil, but the stories are too numerous to be considered isolated. Some say the stone reacts to approaching thunderstorms. A few hours before the clouds appear, its surface becomes slightly warm, as if it were absorbing energy from the air. There's no explanation for this phenomenon. No other stone nearby exhibits similar properties. Sometimes tourists have noticed the surface becoming smooth and damp, even on dry days, as if the stone were breathing the moisture rising from the ground. At the beginning of the 20th century, one explorer wrote in his diary that he noticed a barely perceptible vibration beneath the stone, which ceased as soon as one moved a few steps away. He believed this was due to the underground water currents that flowed beneath the Sitting Stone, but even he acknowledged that the object's behavior was too strange for an ordinary boulder, which should react differently to water movement. Another mystery is the stone's absolute immobility. Severe floods have repeatedly reshaped the shore, carrying away earth and small stones, but the seated stone has remained in place, as if anchored to the earth by an invisible root. The lower part of the stone seems firmly anchored underground, and if you try to move it, it resists the very nature of movement. But no one knows how deep it goes, or what lies beneath. Despite numerous attempts to explain its origin through natural processes, no theory provides a complete answer. If the stone truly stood here for thousands of years, how did it maintain such a smooth surface? How could it have survived harsh winters and still look as if it had been recently polished? Why is it located in the precise spot where the lake appears deeper than in other parts of the shore? Some researchers believed the stone may have been part of an ancient sanctuary that disappeared long ago. It may have been surrounded by other stone pillars, forming a circle or line, but all of this collapsed under the influence of time and water. If so, the sitting stone is the last remaining element of an entire system, the meaning of which has long been lost to the earth and waves. Today, it still stands at the edge of the lake, as if dividing two worlds, water and land. It reflects the light so that it seems alive, and even those who don't believe in legends feel a strange calm near it, as if the stone holds a power that has survived many eras. Perhaps one day the lake will recede and reveal what lies beneath. But for now, the sitting stone remains a silent guardian of Isikul, whose mystery remains as inviolable as its own form. Monolith Tisaveva. Deep in the tropical depths, where moist air slowly rises above the earth, creating a sense of eternal twilight peace, stands one of Sri Lanka's most enigmatic stones, the Tisawewa monolith. Situated near an ancient pool whose origins are lost in time, the stone itself seems as intimately connected to the water as tree roots are to the earth. Its shape is too perfect, its position too precise, and its surface too smooth to be considered an ordinary fragment of rock. The monolith appears to be part of a long-vanished structure. Its distinct vertical edge aligns with the direction of the sun's first ray on the vernal equinox, and this alignment repeats itself every year with such precision that many observers believe it is no coincidence. It seems the stone has stood here since an era when knowledge of the sun's paths was especially important, but no surviving chronicle describes its creation. The stone's surface appears polished. Even during the rainy season, it remains smooth, free of the erosions that water usually leaves on hard rock. This surprises researchers, as tropical downpours can erode even the most dense structures. But the Tisawewa monolith seems to resist time, maintaining its shape with an incomprehensible resilience. The smoothness of its facets evokes a reflexive urge to run one's hand over the stone to confirm that it truly hasn't been worked with modern tools. Some claimed the stone was once part of a long line of monoliths that stretched along the shore of the reservoir. However, over time, most of the stones either disappeared under a layer of soil or eroded so badly that they were no longer recognizable. If this theory is correct, then the Tisawewa monolith is the last witness to an ancient system built in an era about which we know too little to connect all the fragments into a coherent story. There's a strikingly accurate observation. On days when the sun reaches its highest point, the shadow cast by the stone falls precisely in the direction some researchers believe the ancient path ran. This connection raises the question of whether the monolith was part of a landmark used by people in very ancient times. If so, it was not just a stone, but a dot on an ancient map, written without letters, but understandable to those who knew how to read the lines of light. Sometimes you can notice the stone's surface vibrating slightly when a gentle ripple passes through the water. The vibration is invisible to the eye, but can be felt with the palm of your hand. It seems to respond to the movement of the water, as if there is an invisible connection between the stone and the lake. Locals believe the monolith was placed there for a reason, and that it was meant to listen to the water, reflecting its rhythms and turning them into clues for those who once lived nearby. Surviving legends tell of how, in ancient times, the stone was used for special rituals. People would approach it at the first rays of the sun and wait for its upper facet to catch the light. They believed that at this moment, water and sky united, and the stone served as a conductor. It's impossible to say what exactly they were trying to hear, but the stone's precise position relative to the horizon suggests its role in ancient beliefs. Some researchers believe Tisawewa was associated with the measurement of time or seasons. On its southern side, there is a thin vertical line, barely visible without direct light. On certain days, the shadow of this line overlaps a small depression near the base, creating the impression that the stone itself marks the moment of transition from one period to another. This may be a coincidence, but such coincidences are rarely simple. A traveler from the early 20th century reportedly claimed that the stone appeared different at night. Its surface seemed to absorb the light of the stars and reflect only some of it, creating a strange pattern. This observation cannot be said to be accurate, but it strikingly aligns with ancient stories about the monolith being connected not only to the sun, but also to the sky. Some believed it to be part of a heavenly road, used by spirits to find their way back to the human world. No less astonishing is how the monolith withstands the effects of water. The bank of the Tissawewa has changed many times, sometimes sinking, sometimes rising, sometimes retreating dozens of steps. But the stone has always remained in a perfect position, as if it knew exactly where it belonged. This gives the impression that it is firmly anchored deep underground, and its lower part may be much larger than what is visible. Some researchers attempted to scan the surrounding soil, but the structure proved so dense that no simple methods yielded results. It is said that there is a cavity or a bend in the rock beneath the monolith, but no evidence has been found. All this only reinforces the impression that the stone stands there for a reason, but as part of some hidden system whose center has long since disappeared, far from human attention. Today, the Tissawewa monolith remains a mystery, one that neither time nor science can dispel. It stands near an ancient reservoir, as if still guarding that line of light that was once important to those who saw the world differently. And everyone who approaches the stone feels the same thing. It is not random. It is too precise, too calm, too ancient to be simply a boulder forgotten by nature. Pumalca Monolith. In the highlands of Peru, where the air becomes so thin that each breath feels like a separate effort, stands one of the most enigmatic stones in the Andes, the Pumalca Monolith. It's located in a place where soft cloud shadows drift slowly across the slopes, and the silence is so profound it seems alive. Approaching Pumalca reveals that this stone is unlike any other in the region. It seems designed by someone, yet there's no evidence to prove who could have created such a work. The monolith consists of numerous planes intersecting at angles too precise to be natural. Each facet resembles a surface smoothed by a large tool that could work the stone as if it were clay. But the main question is how the ancient people who lived here many centuries ago could have created such smooth surfaces when even the simple tools of that time would have left crude marks. There are no such marks on the monolith. Locals call Pumalcu the stone door. They believe it once opened, but not like ordinary doors. It's said its facets would change structure in certain light, and those standing nearby could see what was hidden from ordinary view. This is just a legend, but when you stand near the monolith, it truly becomes clear that the light plays on its surface in an unusual way, creating the impression of movement where the stone remains motionless. What's particularly striking is how some of the monolith's faces are aligned parallel to each other with astonishing precision. Nature rarely creates such coincidences. Most often, stone contains a multitude of random cracks, lines, and irregularities, but Pumalca is devoid of chaos. Its structure evokes the feeling that each plane is constructed with a specific purpose, and each line obeys a logic we don't yet understand. One legend says the monolith was created in a very distant time when people could talk to stone. Ancient craftsmen, according to this story, knew how to alter the structure of the rock, making it flexible like wax. If this is to be believed, Pumalca could have been part of a larger structure destroyed by time. But no trace of this structure has been found, and the stone stands alone, like a sentinel left alone after the disappearance of an entire civilization. Some researchers suggest the monolith may have been associated with solar or constellation observation. Its surface features thin projections that create uniquely shaped shadows on the equinoxes and solstices. These shadows move across the surface so precisely that they appear to be part of an ancient calendar. However, if it truly is a calendar, it is too complex for simple use. It seems as if it was created for those with a high level of knowledge about the movements of celestial bodies. Equally strange is the fact that the monolith's surface temperature fluctuates differently than the surrounding rocks. On cold nights, Pumalca retains a slight warmth, as if something within it is holding on to the remnants of the day's energy. On hot days, on the contrary, the surface remains cool. This effect cannot be explained definitively. Perhaps it's due to the unique composition of the rock, but then, why don't other nearby rocks exhibit this behavior? Many travelers have described a strange effect. When standing near Pumalca in complete silence, a slight noise, like a deep, low rumble, is felt. It's not audible to the ears, but felt by the body, like a trembling of air. This sound is impossible to record. No one knows what causes it, but those who have experienced it claim it emanates from the stone itself, as if processes are taking place within it, hidden from our perception. It has been suggested that Pumalka is not a single stone, but merely the visible portion of a larger structure extending deep into the earth. Researchers have attempted to examine the soil around the monolith, but the ground is too dense and the slopes too unstable for safe excavation. If part of the structure is indeed hidden beneath the stone, it could be much larger than anything visible on the surface. Of particular interest is a small niche located on the underside of the monolith. It resembles a man-made depression, but it bears no scratches that would indicate tool use. Proponents of mystical theories believe the niche served as a place for special objects associated with rituals. More cautious researchers suggest it may be a natural cavity, although its shape is too regular. There's a story from the early 20th century about a man who spent the night next to the monolith, waiting for dawn. He claimed to have seen the dawn light reflect off the stone's surface, creating a bright horizontal line on the ground. This line coincided with the direction of an ancient road that runs nearby. Perhaps this was a coincidence, but the many similar coincidences in Pumalka's history seem too significant to ignore. Another mystery concerns how Pumalka interacts with rain. When a heavy downpour begins, the water flows across its surface, forming even stripes that flow downwards of nearly equal width. This behavior of water is only possible with a perfectly smooth structure. This creates the impression that the stone was once part of a mechanism in which water played a vital role, perhaps in regulating the cycles of nature. Locals say that in ancient times, people considered Pumalku a place of passage. They believed that on certain nights, the stone became thinner, and those who approached it close enough could hear voices coming from another world. These stories are hard to believe, but even modern observers have noticed that the stone creates strange sound effects that are difficult to associate with ordinary natural phenomena. Today, the Pumalka monolith stands alone among the mountains, a silent reminder that some mysteries survived the disappearance of their creators. Its clean lines, perfectly crafted facets, and strange effects of light and sound amaze even those accustomed to treating stories of ancient civilizations with caution. And the longer it stands, the stronger the sense becomes that Pumalka is not just a stone slab, but a fragment of long-lost knowledge that continues to breathe between the lines of its smooth edges. Monolith of Storr. In northern Scotland, where the sea wind cuts through the landscape with sharp gusts and the sky seems infinitely low, rises one of the world's most recognizable and yet enigmatic monoliths, the stone pillar known as the Storr. It towers over the island's rugged terrain, like a vast sentinel, watching over a land that remembers far more than it can tell. The Storr resembles a pointed tower carved from solid rock. Its summit seems to point skyward, while its sides are incredibly straight for a natural feature. Every line on its surface seems to be the continuation of some great, long-forgotten idea. Locals believe the monolith was created by forces that lived here long before the first settlements. On its surface, one can see thin vertical stripes running from the very top to the base. They resemble traces of rain, but are too smooth, as if painted in a single stroke. Sometimes in the rays of the setting sun, these stripes create the illusion that the stone is slowly pulsating. Naturally, this is simply an effect of the light, but it is difficult to observe without an internal tremor. The surrounding cliffs are eroded by wind and rain, but the Storr remains standing. It has remained virtually unchanged over hundreds of years of observation. It seems as if some force holds it from decay, as if sheltering it from the merciless climate. Researchers have noted that its rock structure differs from that of nearby massifs, raising many questions about its origin. One legend says, this monolith is the petrified finger of an ancient giant who guarded these lands. Another claims it was erected by ancient sages to mark the boundary between the visible and spiritual worlds. These stories are unproven, but they strikingly agree on one thing. The Storr was never considered an ordinary part of nature. Its form is too expressive, its presence too heavy. Its location is particularly noteworthy. The Storr is aligned with the sun's rays during the summer solstice. When the first light hits the stone, its summit glows with a soft golden glow, and its shadow extends far down the slope. Some primitive cultures use similar phenomena to navigate time, but it is unknown whether the Storr was part of such practices. There's an observation that often evokes whispers. During periods of strong wind, a low hum can be heard at the foot of the monolith. It's unlike the usual sound of wind because it has a consistent frequency. Some claim the hum seems to emanate from the ground itself, passing through the stone structure and turning into sound. The source is impossible to pinpoint, but the effect is too constant to be random. Tidal waters, reaching the lower slopes, leave traces of salt on the surface of the store, but this salt sometimes forms strange patterns reminiscent of ancient symbols. While this could be dismissed as the normal distribution of moisture and minerals, it's highly likely that ancient markings, created by humans and later erased by time, once existed here, leaving only faint traces. Despite its enormous size, the store has a remarkably smooth base. It doesn't appear to be the result of destruction, although similar monoliths rarely have such a distinct lower boundary. This suggests that the store may have been part of a larger complex that collapsed long ago, leaving only the most solid element. What this complex was is unknown. There's an old account from a traveler in the late 19th century. He claimed to have seen a faint glow emanating from the top of the monolith at night. He described it as a pale silver light that could not have been produced by the moon or stars. Of course, such stories are hard to take seriously, but locals still report instances where the store's summit has appeared strangely bright. Some researchers believe the store served as a landmark for ancient seafarers. Its shape is visible from afar, even in low clouds. If this is true, the monolith could have served as part of an ancient route used by people who lived here many centuries ago. However, the lack of written evidence makes this theory mere conjecture. The most mysterious thing is the feeling that comes over everyone who stands at the foot of the store. It's a sense of presence, as if the stone is watching. Its summit, pointed skyward, makes one feel small in the presence of something that has survived hundreds of generations. And the longer you gaze at the monolith, the more you sense that its secret lies not in the stone's structure, but in how it interacts with the landscape and time. Today, the store remains a symbol of the Scottish land. Its shadow moves across the slopes just as it did centuries ago. Its summit still catches the first rays of the sun. Its massif still seems to resist destruction. And no one knows how much longer it will stand, guarding its secret. The secret of a stone that seems not simply a part of nature, but a deliberate mark left in the landscape by an ancient force. Yonaguni Underwater Monolith. On the outskirts of the archipelago, where the water becomes so clear that the bottom is visible in the depths, and the silence beneath the surface resembles still air, lies one of the most mysterious objects in the underwater world, the Yonaguni Monolith. It's located off the coast of an island where the current constantly shifts direction, yet the structure itself remains unchanged, as if carved from the rock by a hand that knew what the perfect stone city should look like. At first glance, the monolith appears to be simply a stepped rock. But the closer one gets, the more one senses that its form is too perfect. Enormous straight lines, powerful horizontal slabs, rectangular projections, and even angles create the illusion of ancient architecture. Viewed from above, Yonaguni resembles a gigantic terrace, extending into the depths, like the foundation of a submerged complex. The most noticeable part of the monolith are its ledges, which appear to have been carved from stone. They are all the same height, and their edges are so smooth that it seems impossible to explain their formation by natural forces. At the same time, the water passing over the surface creates a soft ripple of light, making the stone seem alive, as if it were slowly breathing beneath the ocean. There are ledges resembling staircases leading downward. Each step is wide and perfectly level, without the typical chips and slopes found in natural formations. Sometimes it seems as if one could descend these steps if they weren't underwater, but no one knows whether they were man-made or simply a surprising coincidence, caused by the destructive forces of the sea. One of the monolith's most enigmatic features is its enormous vertical wall. It's so straight that it resembles the building's facade. It features deep, evenly spaced horizontal lines. Natural erosion rarely creates such systematic patterns, especially underwater, where the currents constantly shift. These lines appear too neat, as if they were intentional. Some researchers have speculated that the monolith may have been part of an ancient structure built at a time when sea levels were significantly lower. If this is true, the Yonaguni underwater complex could be a testament to a civilization that existed long before the known cultures of East Asia. However, there is no evidence for this hypothesis yet. All that remains are perfectly straight lines, difficult to explain using conventional methods. Of particular interest are the so-called platforms, flat stone surfaces located at different levels. They are connected by ledges and form a structure resembling a multi-level terrace. Some believe this is a natural result of rock erosion, but the accuracy of the formation raises doubts. The platforms are so flat that they sometimes look like sections of an ancient plaza or the foundations of buildings. On one level, there's a depression resembling a rectangular pool. Its walls are so straight that they give the impression of an artificial shape. However, the pool's depth is too shallow to be considered part of the natural landscape. It appears to have served a specific purpose, perhaps related to rituals or water storage. But in the underwater world, everything loses meaning, and the answers are hidden beneath layers of time. Observers sometimes notice unusual underwater acoustics near the monolith. If you swim near the vertical walls, you can hear a muffled hum that seems too deep to be the usual sounds of the sea. The hum resembles the breathing of a huge mechanism hidden below. Of course, it could simply be the sound of the current, but the coincidence of frequencies evokes a sense of uneasiness, as if there is a hidden void within the stone. Locals tell a legend that, in ancient times, the islands were united by a single land, and on this land stood enormous stone structures. These structures, according to the elders, were built by beings who knew how to manipulate stone so that it would bend to their will. But one day, the land sank into the sea, and only a few fragments survive to this day. When the first scuba divers discovered Yonaguni, they described their discovery as a stone city underwater. But the scientific community is divided. Some believe the monolith is a natural formation, created by erosion, tectonic processes, and wave action. Others are convinced that such a perfectly precise structure could only have been created by man. The truth lies somewhere between these views, but it's hard to find. There's a hypothesis that Yonaguni may have once been a site for observing celestial phenomena. Some of the monolith's projections are oriented in directions that coincide with the sun's position on certain days of the year. If this isn't a coincidence, then perhaps the monolith was part of an ancient complex used to track the movements of celestial bodies. However, the water has obscured all the details, leaving us with only hints. A structure resembling a wide corridor is particularly striking. It runs along the side of the monolith, and its walls are so smooth that it seems as if you're looking at the remains of an ancient temple. In some places, the stone surface has right angles so perfectly formed that they're difficult to explain by natural processes. The corridor leads deeper into the rock, but the underwater lighting is too dim to see where it ends. Individual stone blocks were discovered around the monolith. Some are rectangular and appear to be fragments of larger structures. However, water and time may have altered them so much that their original appearance cannot be determined. Nevertheless, their presence near the main massif raises the question: could they have been part of a single complex? Yonaguni's most powerful impression is not its form, but its feel. It's the sense that beneath the water's surface lies a vast fragment of history we can't read. Every line, every ledge, every perfect angle seems to hint at knowledge that was once obvious and important, but is now hidden by the depths of time. The monolith is silent, but its silence raises more questions than it answers. Today, the underwater monolith of Yonaguni continues to excite the imagination of explorers. It reminds us that the sea holds secrets no less than deserts and mountains, and every time one descends toward it, one feels as if they are approaching something ancient and majestic, created by hands or forces about which we know too little. Stone columns of Los Organos. On one of the Canary Islands, where cliffs plunge straight into the ocean and the wind carries salt so thickly that it clings to your skin like dust, stands a natural-unnatural phenomenon, the Los Organos columns. From the sea, they resemble a gigantic stone organ, as if someone had constructed the instrument from solidified lava. But the longer you gaze at these vertical rows, the more doubt arises. Could nature have created such perfect symmetry? Each column stretches tens of meters upward, and most are perfectly polygonal. They are so closely packed together that they create the impression of a vast wall, each stone obeying a strict rhythm. Their majestic verticality makes one feel dwarfed by them, as if standing at the foot of an ancient temple, built entirely by non-human hands. What's particularly striking is how evenly the columns divide the space. There's almost no chaos between them. Each projection is adjacent to the next, repeating the angle, height, and direction. Natural processes rarely leave behind order, but at Los Organos, the order is too strict, almost metallic. In the morning light, the columns cast long shadows that fall on the waves, creating the feeling that stone and water are engaged in an ancient dialogue. The strangest feature is the sound. On days when the sea rises higher than usual, the waves crash against the columns, creating a deep, low rumble. It doesn't sound like the sound of the surf. It resembles the sound of a huge instrument being slowly tuned. It's this hum that gave rise to the name organ. However, observers have noted that the rumble sometimes occurs even when the sea is calm, as if it's caused not by the water, but by the internal tension of the rock mass itself. In some places, the columns display perfectly straight fractures. These fractures don't look like signs of destruction. They resemble facets separated from each other by a single movement. Remarkably, the facets align so precisely, as if they were aligned along a pre-calculated line. Viewed from above, the fractures appear to form perfectly straight corridors leading deep into the rock. Legends say these columns once served as a lighthouse. Locals said that many centuries ago, on certain nights, the tops of the columns glowed with a faint blue light. This glow supposedly helped sailors find a safe route to shore. There's no confirmation of this, but it's surprising that several ancient accounts from 19th century travelers also mentioned a strange light observed near Los Órganos. One hypothesis holds that the columns are the result of ancient lava flow, which solidified to form a polygonal structure. But even proponents of this theory admit that the columns' perfect shape and enormous height make them unique. Nowhere else in the world does such a structure appear so symmetrical and perfectly aligned. Nature thrives on chaos and randomness, and Los Órganos seems to have been crafted with engineering precision. The water at the foot of the columns has an unusual color. Even on cloudy days, it remains a deep turquoise, as if the water beneath the columns were deeper than the surrounding coastal areas. Some researchers believe an underwater cave formed in ancient times may be hidden below, but no one has been able to explore this area deeply enough. The currents are too strong and the waves too dangerous. Sailors have reported that when the wind is strong, the columns seem to change their sound. The hum becomes high-pitched and harsh, like someone drawing a stick across the strings of a huge harp. Such observations were always accompanied by alarm. The sea around the columns seemed to become restless, and fishermen tried to avoid the area. Perhaps this is a coincidence. But coincidences happen all too often. Some researchers believe the columns may have been part of an ancient coastal system, created by nature but later modified by human hands. Perhaps someone once smoothed the edges or reinforced the projections for ritual purposes. But there is no evidence of intervention, and each edge looks as if it could have been carved by nature, if nature had any engineering ability. There's an observation related to the shadow. On the winter solstice, the shadow of the tallest column falls on a specific spot at the foot of the cliff. This precise coincidence has been noted by several researchers. It raises the question, was Los Órganos once used as a massive solar calendar? If so, the columns couldn't have been a simple natural phenomenon. They would have served as part of a more complex observation system. One column, located closer to the center of the massif, attracts particular attention. It is wider than the others and has a perfectly smooth vertical edge, reminiscent of the surface of a wall. Viewed from below, it appears to have been carved like a huge stone pillar, but no tool could have left such a clean surface, especially considering the column's size and height. Occasionally, strange shadows cast by the columns appear on the horizon. In the twilight, they appear as long silhouettes, reminiscent of figures. Elders said that these figures are the island's guardians, watching over the people. Perhaps it's just a trick of the light, but everyone who has seen these shadows has noted the same thing. They look too human-like and appear only under specific conditions, when the sun has almost set. Today, the Los Órganos columns remain one of the most majestic mysteries of the Canary Islands. They seem to merge two worlds, the natural world and the human world. Every facet, every sound, every shadow creates the feeling that these columns contain ancient knowledge that has outlived its creators and now speaks only to those who know how to listen. Men hear of Gavrin. In northwestern France, among hills covered with damp grass and sparse bushes, stands one of Europe's most bizarre stone pillars, the Gavrin Menhir. At first glance, it appears to be an ordinary ancient boulder, but approach it and it becomes clear. This stone is unlike any other. Its verticality is striking, its proportions perplexing, and its surface bears marks that cannot be explained by either time or natural processes. Gavrin stands so confidently, as if it were placed there deliberately. It doesn't lie, tilt, or blend neatly into the surrounding landscape. It stands as if held by invisible forces. Its base extends deep underground, and attempts to determine its exact depth have always been unsuccessful. This stone column seems to extend downwards much further than its visible portion would suggest. The menhir's most striking feature is its surface. It features lines that look like carvings. They run across the stone in long, winding paths, sometimes intersecting, sometimes creating strange loops. These lines don't resemble ordinary scratches or cracks. They are too uniform in width, too precise in direction. Some researchers believed they were part of ancient symbols, but no known language matches these designs. On certain days of the year, especially when the sun is low on the horizon, the lines on the stone become brighter. The contrast increases so much that the lines themselves seem to emit a faint glow. This may be just a trick of the light, but the observation is repeated year after year. People who have witnessed this glow often report a strange sensation, as if the stone were awakening. The orientation of the menhir deserves special attention. It is positioned so that its shadow falls precisely on one of the ancient paths leading to the ancient ritual site. This path was used as far back as the 4th millennium BC, and many believe that Gavrina was part of a ritual system. If so, it was not just a stone pillar, but a landmark that helped people tell time or direct processions. Legend has it that a menhir is a petrified guardian, protecting a place where secret rituals once took place. One version claims that a core is hidden within the stone, an object that makes the pillar immobile and impenetrable. Some have tried to test this legend by striking the menhir with metal objects and claiming the sound is too deep, as if there really is a void or other structure within. On the lower part of the stone, traces resembling circular depressions are visible. They are spaced evenly, and their shape does not resemble erosion marks. These depressions could have been traces of attachments or points of contact with another object, but no part that could be connected to them was found either nearby or in the surrounding area. This creates the impression that the menhir was part of a lost structure. Some researchers have suggested that Gavrin's menhir may have been part of an astronomical system. Its top is slightly tilted, and this tilt coincides with the direction of sunrise on the summer solstice. When viewed from a certain angle, the menhir visually connects with the horizon, creating the impression of a unified form. This may have been important to ancient people who observed the movements of celestial bodies. There are reports from the early 20th century that the menhir emits a quiet sound in windy weather. Observers described it as a low hum, like a distant voice. The stone could resonate under the influence of gusts of wind, but many claimed the hum had a strange rhythm, as if emanating not from the rock itself, but from something within. This sound was always barely audible, but it gave rise to legends of the breathing stone. Grass grows around Gavrina, but the soil in its immediate vicinity appears unusual. It's too dense, as if compacted by centuries of weight. Some areas resemble a hardened surface where people once walked frequently. It's possible that rituals were indeed performed near the menhir, and the earth has preserved traces of these ceremonies. But without definitive proof, this remains only a guess. There's another mystery associated with the stone. On its northern side, a dark patch appears unchanging over time. It's not erased by rain, doesn't lighten in the sun, and isn't eroded by the wind. This patch resembles a hardened shadow. Some have believed it to be the mark of a lightning strike, but the shape is too smooth. Others are convinced the stone contains some kind of mark, the meaning of which has long been lost. Standing before Gavrin's menhir, one feels as if they are not just a stone, but the intersection of lines that once connected earth, sky, and time. Its verticality commands respect, its mysterious lines evoke anxiety, and its stillness reminds one that there are things that have survived thousands of years and continue to maintain their silence. Today, the menhir remains one of Europe's mysteries. It seems to belong to a world that vanished long ago, but managed to leave behind this sign, a sign that cannot be deciphered, but also impossible to ignore. Its presence raises more questions than answers, and perhaps that is why it continues to attract people who search the stone for traces of ancient knowledge lost among the hills. Stone Pillar Mzima. Deep in the African savanna, amid tall grasses slowly moving in a heavy, warm wind, stands a solitary stone pillar, known to locals as Mzima. At first glance, it appears to be an ordinary boulder that has accidentally ended upright, but the longer one gazes at it, the more one senses that this is not just a stone, but part of an ancient structure that survived the disappearance of the people who created it. Mzima differs from other monoliths in that it stands on a plain where there are no rocks from which it could have formed naturally. The pillar rises above the ground to a height unusual for such flat regions. Its surface is smooth but not even, It's covered with numerous long, gently curved grooves, one after another, as if someone's fingers had traced the stone thousands of years ago. These grooves are remarkably uniform in depth, as if they were created intentionally. Their rhythm is so precise that it's hard to believe they were created by the forces of nature, which usually create disordered lines. Locals believe the pillar didn't appear here by itself. Legend has it that in ancient times, giants roamed these lands, using stone pillars as landmarks across vast distances. They erected them where the land was considered sacred. The legend may be just a fairy tale, but the very fact that Mzima stands hundreds of kilometers from the nearest quarries makes one wonder how it ended up here. Some researchers have speculated that the stone may have been brought by ancient tribes, but this would require knowledge and strength that has not been confirmed. The pillar is too heavy to be moved by ordinary people without specialized equipment. Even modern machinery would struggle to cope with such a task. However, the pillar's surface bears no signs of processing, which would be expected if someone attempted to transport or lift it. Mzima's most enigmatic feature is its perfect verticality. Even intense rainy seasons, when the ground becomes soft and saturated with moisture, have not altered its position. It hasn't tilted, hasn't sunk deeper, hasn't shifted a single degree. It's as if its base extends so deeply into the earth that it functions as a structure in itself, holding the pillar steady despite everything happening around it. At the base of the stone is a small area clear of grass. Grass growing nearby never appears directly next to the pillar, although the soil there is no different. Some believe that part of the object is buried underground, creating vibrations or heat that inhibit plant growth. People who have approached the stone on hot days have claimed to feel a slight warmth at the base, which cannot be explained by the sun's influence. When the wind passes through the dry grasses, Mzima sometimes emits a barely audible sound, a low hum, like a deep sigh. This sound doesn't resemble ordinary air vibrations, although that's how it's usually explained. However, those who heard it at night described it as more rhythmic, as if the stone were responding to the wind. This phenomenon gave rise to legends that the pillar is alive, or that there are voids within it that allow air to flow in a special way. Some researchers, examining the surface of the pillar, notice small, round depressions arranged symmetrically. They resemble traces of fastenings or places where wooden or stone elements could have been inserted, forming part of a larger structure. But if there was a complex around, nothing remains. The savanna soil absorbs everything human-made within a matter of decades. There's a theory that Mzima may have been part of an ancient calendar or observation line. Its summit juts out slightly on the western side, and on certain days the shadow from this protrusion falls directly on a small natural rise. If this is considered a coincidence, it's far too precise. But if we assume the stone was placed intentionally, the question arises: who possessed the knowledge to construct such landmarks in the savanna? Another mystery concerns how Mzima reflects light. At sunset, its surface takes on a strange hue, not red or gold, but a deep green, as if the stone is absorbing the surrounding light and altering it. Some believe this is due to the minerals that make up the rock. However, studies have shown that the pillar is composed of ordinary stone, which should not exhibit such optical properties. In the early 20th century, a traveler noted that Mzima seemed to brighten at night, despite no light sources nearby. He claimed to have seen a faint glow on one side of the stone. This observation strikingly matches the accounts of local tribes, who claimed the stone was visible in the dark. Perhaps this is simply a reflection of moonlight. But why the glow is visible even on moonless nights remains a mystery. Some have noted that standing next to the stone in absolute silence creates a feeling of slight pressure on the chest, as if the air around them becomes denser. This may be a psychosomatic reaction caused by the monolith's impressive appearance, but people who are not susceptible to suggestion have confirmed this effect time and again. It is especially noticeable when the sun completely disappears behind the horizon. Underground surveys around the stone have been conducted several times, but all that has been discovered is the unusual density of the soil beneath the pillar. It's too dense, as if compacted by enormous pressure. It feels as if the lower part of Mzima has been pressed into the ground with incredible force. But who or what could have done this remains unknown. The rock beneath the stone also differs from the rock that makes up the pillar itself, raising even more questions. There's a legend that a stone fell from the sky. The people who tell it don't explain what exactly they mean. but ancient oral traditions sometimes allude to stone lights that appeared in the sky and fell to Earth. Of course, these stories could be metaphors for rare celestial phenomena, but the connection between the legends and the real thing seems too unusual to be completely ignored. The monolith serves as an ideal landmark for travelers walking through the savannah. It can be seen for miles. It seems deliberately placed to be visible from afar. No other stone in the area reaches such a height or has such a smooth, elongated shape. It may have been part of an ancient route that passed through these lands, and people used it as a landmark long before the advent of written history. Today, Memzima stands as it did the day it was first seen. It has survived winds, rains, droughts, and fires. It has been untouched by time or people. It remains a silent witness to eras about which we know so little, and everyone who stands beside it feels the same. This stone is no accident. It is too straight, too still, too mysterious. It seems to be waiting to be understood, but the time has not yet come. Underwater monoliths of Sardinia. Off the coast of Sardinia, where the sea surface seems too calm to conceal anything significant, lies a place known only to a few underwater archaeologists. At depths where sunlight no longer reaches the bottom in its full strength, enormous stone blocks, monoliths, stand and lie so perfectly aligned that they seem man-made, created in an era from which not a single line of writing remains. They appear to be part of an ancient structure, submerged many centuries ago, perhaps due to the slow rise in sea levels that has transformed the entire coastline. The first impression of these monoliths is one of impossibility. They are too large to have been moved by water. They are too smooth to have been created by nature. Their edges are sharply defined, and their angles are sometimes so perfect, as if a giant tool had once carved the stone, creating perfect geometric shapes. Some blocks stand upright, like pillars, while others form long rows, reminiscent of walls or parts of large platforms. Sometimes, an underwater current creates soft ripples of light on the stone surfaces. At these moments, the monoliths appear to breathe. Reflections play between the lines, creating the illusion of movement in a place of absolute silence. What's striking is that some of these blocks are evenly spaced, as if they were placed in a single row. Such an arrangement is rare in natural landscapes. Local fishermen said that many decades ago, their ancestors would find strange, smooth-edged pieces of stone in their nets, seemingly out of place among the simple seabed. Back then, no one paid any attention, but later, when deep diving became possible, it turned out that these remnants belonged to a vast underwater structure stretching for several hundred meters. Some of the pieces look as if they were broken off not by time, but by a catastrophic force. The most impressive part of the complex is a large vertical pillar, standing almost perfectly level despite the constant pressure of water. It is quite tall and extends into the seabed to an unknown depth. Its surface is marked by long furrows running from its summit to its base. These furrows do not resemble those that would be caused by water. They are too parallel, too linear, as if they were created intentionally, following a specific rhythm. It has been suggested that these underwater monoliths may have been part of an ancient platform connected to the coast. They may have served as supports for enormous structures that eventually sank underwater. Considering that sea levels in this region have changed gradually over thousands of years, such platforms could indeed have been submerged. But then the question arises, who built them and why? Some researchers believe these stone structures may have been part of an ancient harbor. Their height and length suggest they may have been piers or fortifications. However, there is no evidence of an ancient city capable of constructing such structures in the area. Archaeological traces on the shore are scant. Everything creates the impression of a civilization whose traces have been almost completely erased by time. One of the most unusual elements of the complex is a block standing apart from the others. It is a perfect cylindrical shape, and its surface is remarkably smooth. A recess resembling a slot, into which wooden or metal elements could have been inserted, is noticeable at the top. This slot is exquisitely precise, and it is difficult to imagine how the force of the waves could have created such symmetry. The cylindrical block appears to have been part of a device or mechanism whose purpose has long been lost. At certain times of the year, currents become so strong that they cause the monoliths to emit deep, booming sounds. Underwater explorers have described them as a low, vibrating hum, as if something in the water were resonating with the ocean's energy. These sounds only occur when the currents are in a certain direction. Observers are certain that the hum they hear cannot be a normal marine phenomenon. It is too persistent and repeats during the same weeks every year. Some swimmers have noted the strange behavior of light underwater. When sunlight penetrates the depths at a particular angle, the surfaces of the monoliths reflect them, creating distinct lines of light, like markers. These lines intersect at a specific point located above one of the largest stone blocks. Perhaps this is a coincidence, but the geometry is too perfect to avoid suspicion that this is a sunlight reader, created by ancient people with an unexpectedly precise understanding. There's a legend preserved by coastal residents. It speaks of stone towers that once stood where the sea now stands. These towers, according to legend, served as gateways to another world. With the arrival of a huge wave, mentioned in the same legend, everything was submerged. Those who tell this legend today don't know where it came from, but similar stories are found in other parts of the Mediterranean. Perhaps a long-ago catastrophe truly did occur here, destroying the civilization they had built. Another mystery is that the soil beneath the monoliths sometimes vibrates. This sensation was recorded by instruments lowered to the seabed. The vibrations are too weak to be felt by the body, but distinct enough for sensitive sensors. They occur irregularly, as if processes unrelated to underwater currents are at work beneath the seabed. Some believe there is a layer of voids beneath the monoliths, possibly the remains of underground structures. The strangeness of the complex is heightened by the fact that some of the blocks are too tall to be natural decay. They look not like a randomly split stone, but like an element that once stood upright, supporting another structure. And given the depth at which everything is located, it becomes clear that the monoliths could have been part of a lost world, hidden until humans learned to dive underwater. Today, Sardinia's underwater monoliths remain among the most enigmatic anomalies of the Mediterranean Sea. They attract researchers, archaeologists, and those seeking traces of ancient civilizations. Each monolith remains silent, but their shapes, proportions, and arrangement speak louder than words. Here, beneath the water, lies a history that, if only we could decipher it, would revolutionize our understanding of humanity's past. Monolith Kalimantan. Deep in the depths of Kalimantan Island, where the rainforests seem endless and even light barely penetrates the treetops, lies one of Southeast Asia's most unusual stone objects, a monolith locally known as the Stone Blade. It stands on a hillside, like a gigantic fragment of an ancient structure, thrust into the ground at a perfect angle. Its shape is so strange and unexpected for a natural stone that many researchers believe it is more than just a geological phenomenon. The Kalimantan monolith is striking above all for its height. It rises above the ground like a giant arrowhead, reaching toward the sky. Its upper portion tapers to a sharp, blade-like point, while its lower portion widens and disappears into the soil. The stone's surface appears to have been worked at some point. Long, straight lines run unbroken from the top to the bottom, as if someone had carved the stone in a single stroke. What's particularly striking is how perfectly level the stone stands. Its tilt seems perfectly calculated. It's oriented so that its summit faces the direction where the sun rises over the mountain range on the winter solstice. This coincidence is impossible to ignore, as even modern researchers require meticulous work to establish such precision. But how could an ancient culture, about which almost nothing is known, erect a monolith with such meticulous care? Locals have many legends about the stone blade. Some believe it was created by spirits who once descended from the mountains and left the stone as a sign. Others believe the monolith is the remnant of an ancient weapon that once stood in the center of a large settlement. But none of these legends explain the origin of the long furrows that run precisely in the direction of the monolith's slope. The stone's surface sometimes appears smooth, although upon closer inspection, it is revealed to be composed of numerous very fine facets. This creates an interesting effect. When sunlight hits the monolith at a certain angle, it is reflected in a multitude of tiny specks, as if the stone were coated with a thin layer of metallic particles. In fact, the rock is ordinary, but why it reflects light this way remains a mystery. One of the most unusual features of the monolith is the absence of other stones of the same type around it. The soil and slopes are composed of soft ground, incapable of supporting large masses. But the monolith stands firmly, as if it had been driven so deeply into the earth that it became part of a hidden underground structure. Researchers have attempted to determine the depth to which the stone extends, but the soil beneath it is too dense and saturated with tree roots, making any excavation impossible. The surface of the monolith on the eastern side has barely noticeable horizontal stripes. They are spaced evenly, as if someone used the stone as a scale or measuring instrument. The stripes are too straight to be random cracks and too precise to be natural erosion. This suggests that the monolith was part of an astronomical system designed to monitor the movement of the sun. Sometimes the stone blade emits strange sounds. This occurs at night, when the humidity in the forest reaches its peak. Researchers have noted that the stone seems to resonate under the influence of wind or temperature fluctuations. The resulting hum sounds as if the stone is hollow inside. However, the low frequency makes the sound almost imperceptible. People who have heard it often feel a slight tremor under their feet, as if the ground around the monolith is reacting to these vibrations. There is evidence that, in very ancient times, the monolith was surrounded by a path. Local elders speak of a circular path that existed around the stone. This path, they say, was used for rituals associated with the sun and rain. Perhaps this is just a fairy tale, but the ground around the monolith does indeed appear compacted, as if it had been walked on thousands of times. The difference in soil density is noticeable even today, although the forest has begun to engulf any traces of human presence. Some researchers believe the Kalimantan monolith is connected to water. During the rainy season, the stone takes on a strange hue. It darkens faster than the surrounding rock and returns to its original color more slowly. This behavior suggests the stone has a unique structure, possibly capable of absorbing moisture differently than the surrounding rocks. This characteristic suggests the monolith may have been part of a complex aquatic system. No less interesting is the fact that there are no large trees near the monolith. Despite the dense and thick forest around it, a circle of no large roots always remains near the stone. Some attribute this to the soil being too hard, but this is odd, as its composition is identical to the soil just a few steps away. Locals believe that trees avoid this area because the monolith has strong energy. There is no scientific explanation for this yet. A traveler from the early 20th century reportedly saw a soft glow emanating from the top of the monolith on a moonless night. The glow, he said, resembled a faint bluish light that faded as soon as one approached. This observation is difficult to verify, but it remarkably matches local tribal legends that the stone breathes light on certain nights of the year. Some researchers point out that the monolith is located in an area where magnetic anomalies frequently occur. Compasses here sometimes behave unpredictably, with the needle deviating by several degrees. This may be due to the local rock, but why the monolith stands precisely in the center of such an area remains a mystery. The most striking thing is the feeling one experiences when standing next to the stone blade. This sensation is neither fear nor rapture. It is a sense of presence, as if the monolith itself is watching over one. Its majestic silence creates the impression that the stone preserves the memory of thousands of years lived in this place. And the longer you look at it, the more it seems as if it isn't simply standing, it's waiting. Today, the Kalimantan monolith remains one of the most enigmatic structures in the tropical rainforest. It doesn't fit into any known cultural context, has no logical explanation, and defies conventional research methods. It seems specifically designed to induce contemplation, forcing one to ponder lost knowledge, vanished civilizations, and the mysteries hidden beneath the roots of the ancient forest. Martian monoliths. Among the endless plains of Mars and on the surface of its small moon Phobos, there are rock formations that raise more questions than any mysteries on Earth. These structures are striking in their shape, proportions, and solitude. They stand in places where there are no mountains, no traces of destroyed massifs, no logical explanation for why vertical pillars, reminiscent of terrestrial monoliths, rise precisely here. And the longer researchers look at them, the stronger the feeling that these objects are not random. The first Martian monolith was discovered many years ago during observations of the planet's surface. It appeared as a straight pillar rising from a desolate rocky plain. Its shadow was so even that it seemed artificially created. The pillar stood apart from the surrounding rocks, which immediately raised doubts. Nature rarely creates isolated vertical structures unless there is a nearby, broken structure from which they could emerge. Here, however, there was only dust and sand. The monolith's surface appeared smooth, though the strong Martian winds should have covered it with numerous cracks and scratches. Instead, the edge appeared almost smooth, as if it had been shaped rather than left to the elements. Also surprising is that the monolith stands in a site where the soil is loose and prone to settling, but the stone itself stands perfectly vertical, as if its base extends deep into the earth, into rock we can't yet see. There are observations that at certain times of the year, the monolith's shadow is directed toward the same point on the distant Martian horizon. This coincidence is astonishingly precise. Perhaps it's just a coincidence, but too many of the monolith's features give the impression of intentionality. And the more such coincidences accumulate, the harder it is to dismiss them as a simple play of nature. An even stranger sensation arises when examining the monolith on Phobos. Its size and shape raise no less questions. It rises above the moon's rocky surface as if it were installed by someone with an understanding of architecture and geometry. Even in Phobos's low gravity, the monolith remains remarkably stable. It rests on a sloping surface, but the angle doesn't affect its stability. It seems as if the stone has grown into the moon's surface, as if supported by an invisible foundation. Sometimes the shadow of the monolith on Phobos, cast as the satellite passes over Mars, falls on the planet's surface at such an angle that it appears to be a line connecting the two worlds. Naturally, this is merely a coincidence in the movement of celestial bodies, but observers who first saw this line reported an unusual sense of uneasiness. It seemed as if the monolith served as a pointer, directing the gaze not only to the surface but also to the depths. Researchers hypothesized that the monoliths may be the remains of a long-destroyed structure. Perhaps large formations or even buildings once existed on Mars, destroyed by a cataclysm or time. But if so, why are only the vertical forms preserved? Why is there no residual debris around? Why are the stones so perfectly aligned, as if someone had placed them at significant points? Some images show that the surface of the Martian monolith has barely noticeable horizontal stripes. They run parallel to each other, as if the stone was subjected to similar forces. However, natural processes on Mars are characterized by chaos rather than order. If these stripes are indeed artificial, then the question arises, who could have left such traces on a planet where no traces of modern civilizations have been found? Some scientists have attempted to explain the monolith's origin by a fault in the rock. But this explanation doesn't fit well with its verticality. Faults typically create jagged shapes rather than smooth columns. Furthermore, the Martian monolith stands alone, with no similar fragments around it. All of this suggests it was placed in place rather than formed by chance. There's a theory related to the orientation of the monoliths. Researchers have noticed that the Martian object is positioned such that its direction coincides with the path of the sun at its culmination on certain days of the Martian year. If this is true, the monolith could have served as an ancient landmark or as part of a system for astronomical observations. Some proponents of alternative hypotheses believe that the monoliths on Mars and Phobos could have been part of a communication system created by an unknown civilization. This sounds incredible, but the objects themselves are so strange that such theories seem a natural consequence of surprise. Of course, science has no evidence to support such ideas, but there are no simple explanations yet either. There are also legends created by people after the first photographs appeared. They say that the Martian monolith is a guardian watching over the planet, that it hasn't changed over thousands of years because it was created not by nature, but by forces that understand time differently. Of course, these are merely poetic images, but they contain something that reflects a real emotion. When a person looks at a straight stone pillar on an alien planet, they sense that before them is something more than just a stone. Occasionally, strange reflections of light can be seen on the monolith's surface in photographs. These may be reflection peculiarities caused by the angle of the camera. However, observers have noted that the reflections recur at the same moments. If this is a coincidence, it would be too significant. If it is a pattern, it points to structural features of the monolith that have not yet been studied. Some researchers have claimed that the area around the Martian monolith has an unusually dense soil structure. It appears to be compressed around the base, creating the impression that the stone is not simply standing, but rather firmly anchored. This compaction could be the result of an object falling. But if the monolith fell, where are the other traces of the impact? Why is it standing perfectly level? And why is there no other stone nearby? There's even a hypothesis that the Martian monoliths may be much older than any possible civilizations on Earth. Perhaps they appeared here in an era humanity has yet to fully grasp. Perhaps they served as landmarks for creatures capable of traversing vast distances. It all sounds like fantasy, but in the absence of simple explanations, any theory becomes a question, not a statement. The main mystery of the Martian monoliths is the feeling they evoke. It's not just curiosity. It's the feeling that before one stands something that must be explained, but cannot yet be explained. The monoliths stand so alone, so confidently, so strangely, that it's impossible to shake the thought. These are someone's footprints, traces of something we don't yet understand. Today, the monoliths of Mars and Phobos remain symbols of extraterrestrial mystery. They don't reveal their secrets, but that's precisely why they're talked about more and more often. They stand silent, but their silence is louder than any signal. They seem to remind us that the universe holds stories we're only just beginning to read, and many of them are carved in stone, standing beneath an alien sky. Monolith Nabta Playa. Deep in the Egyptian desert, where a hot wind lifts sand so high it turns to mist, stands one of the most enigmatic stones of the ancient world, the Nabta Playa monolith. It sits on a plateau that seems lifeless, yet it preserves structures far older than any structures in the Nile Valley. The monolith appears lonely, but this loneliness is deceptive. It is part of a space that was once the center of an ancient tradition that disappeared long before the first Egyptian kings. At first, it seems like an ordinary stone pillar, one that has survived millennia. But come closer, and you'll notice something odd. Its shape is too smooth, its verticality too precise, and its position in space so perfectly calibrated, as if someone deliberately placed it at the point where the desert meets the sky. The monolith stands at a slight angle, and this angle is no accident. It aligns with one of the guidelines of an ancient circle that once stood nearby. It is believed that smaller stone pillars were once arranged around the monolith, forming a structure that could have served as the earliest prototype of an observation platform. But time has destroyed almost everything. Only traces in the ground remain, barely visible to the naked eye. However, it was the monolith's position that prompted researchers to wonder, could ancient people living as far back as the 10th millennium BC truly have understood celestial cycles so profoundly? The monolith is oriented so that its shadow on the longest day of the year points to the point on the horizon where the sun rises. This coincidence is impossible to ignore. It repeats itself year after year, despite the constant shifting of the desert sands. It seems as if the stone stands where the earth itself has chosen the point where light and time converge. What's particularly interesting is that the monolith's surface features several thin vertical grooves. They are spaced evenly, as if they served as markers. Some researchers believe these grooves could have been used by ancient priests to determine the seasons or observe shadows. But if this is true, it raises the question, who could have created such a system in an era when humans lacked even the most basic tools? There's a small depression on one of the stone's faces. It appears to have been intentionally created, but the depth is too shallow to be used as a niche. The depression is at chest height, and some believe it may have been used to store ritual objects. Perhaps this stone served as part of an ancient ritual path, followed by people worshipping the forces of nature, whose presence they felt in every gust of wind. Legend has it that the Nabta Playa monolith was erected by ancient nomads who came to these lands when there was still a large lake. This legend says the stone served as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. Perhaps this is merely a poetic image, but when viewed in the evening light, the monolith truly seems to connect the horizon and the sky, standing precisely on the line where time stands still. Some researchers have noted that the stone reacts to heat in an unusual way. Its surface heats up more slowly than the surrounding rocks and cools down much faster. This creates an interesting effect. On hot days, the monolith remains cooler longer than the sand around it. This may be due to the stone's internal structure, but this is just a guess. No one knows why it behaves differently. There is evidence that the monolith has an unusual interaction with sound. If a person stands nearby and makes a low, drawn-out sound, it returns as a barely audible echo, as if the stone were hollow. However, when researchers attempted to determine the monolith's structure, no internal cavities were found. Perhaps the stone simply has a special density that creates a resonant effect. Or perhaps there is something inside that we can't yet see. Sometimes on strong windy days, a soft, vibrating hum can be heard near the stone. It's unlike the usual sound of wind sweeping across the desert. The sound seems to emanate from underground, rising through the stone. People who have heard it say it evokes a strange calm, as if the monolith were transmitting through vibrations the memory of ancient rituals that took place there. Small rock fragments, different in composition from the main massif, are often found around the stone. These fragments could have been part of an ancient circle, eroded by time. Some fragments have even angles, which is unusual for natural formations. If there was once a structure around the monolith, it could have been the oldest astronomical device in human history. If so, Nabta Playa is not just a stone, but a key to understanding a world that disappeared before the advent of known civilizations. Of particular interest is the behavior of the monolith's shadow at sunset. On certain days of the year, the shadow falls on a small area near the stone, where a compacted patch of soil can be seen, as if people once stood here, waiting for the moment when the shadow reached the right spot. Perhaps this was a ritual, perhaps it was a way of transmitting knowledge, but the fact that this phenomenon is repeated and the soil still bears traces suggests that the stone was important. Nabta Playa evokes a powerful sense of presence. Standing next to the stone, one feels the desert grow quieter. The air seems to stand still. The monolith seems to collect sounds, light, and time, causing the space around it to become denser. This sensation is neither fear nor awe-inspiring. It is a sense of antiquity, so profound that it ceases to be part of history and becomes part of the earth itself. Today, the monolith remains one of the desert's greatest mysteries. It stands amid sands that have endured endless centuries, and despite its loneliness, it appears not lost, but confident. It seems to know its role, and perhaps those who lived here in the distant 10th millennium BC saw in it something we are still unable to comprehend. A bridge between time and space, a trace of a culture that has vanished but left a mark that has endured all. In Tihuatana, Machu Picchu, high in the Andes, where the air thins and the horizon disappears behind clouds, stands a stone structure known as Intihuatana, the place where the sun is bound. Situated on a mountaintop, overlooking the entire Machu Picchu complex, it seems to be part of a space where stone, light, and silence merge into a single structure. At first glance, Intihuatana resembles a jagged outcrop of rock, but the longer one gazes upon it, the more clearly one realizes. Before them is an object created not by a random stroke of nature, but by the deliberate hand of a master who understood the rhythm of light better than any modern explorer. Intihuatana is no ordinary stone. It is a monolith in which every facet, every angle, and every elevation is significant. Its shape is so carefully crafted that even today its geometry evokes awe. The top of the monolith is a vertical protrusion, reminiscent of a short stone pillar. It seems to reach upward as if trying to touch the sunbeam that, on certain days, falls upon the stone at the perfect angle. The most astonishing feature of Intihuatana is the behavior of its shadow. On the equinoxes, the shadow virtually disappears. It seems to dissolve on the surface of the monolith, and this moment creates the sensation that the stone actually binds the sun, holding it in the desired position. This phenomenon cannot be explained by mere coincidence. It repeats every year and suggests that the builders possessed a profound astronomical knowledge, unbelievable for their time. The monolith is so precisely oriented that it appears to be part of a gigantic stone mechanism. Its tilt aligns with the direction of sunrise on certain days, and its side faces form lines that point to key points on the horizon. As clouds creep across the sky, the light shifts, creating a soft golden shimmer on the monolith's surface. At such moments, the stone seems to come alive, responding to the movement of the celestial body. The Intihuatana stands on a small stone platform, also handcrafted. The surface around the monolith has a strange stepped structure, as if the builders were trying to create a space where the sun could be observed from different angles. These steps are so smooth that at times they appear to have been carved with modern tools, but they were created centuries ago, making their precision even more impressive. Legend has it that the Intihuatana served not only as an astronomical instrument, but also as a ritual object. Locals said the stone pulsates at certain times of the year. Perhaps this is merely a figurative expression. However, those who touched the monolith reported a strange warmth emanating from it, as if from within. This sensation is difficult to explain. The stone usually remains cool, but here one sometimes feels a slight warmth unrelated to the sun's rays. The surface of Intihuatana is covered with numerous small lines and depressions. They appear to have been created intentionally. Some lines run parallel, while others intersect at equal angles. These intersections form a geometric grid, the meaning of which remains unclear. Some believe it was part of a calendar system. Others suggest the lines may have served to reflect light in specific directions. An unusual silence surrounds the monolith. Even the wind rising from the valley doesn't always reach this point. Sometimes, standing near the stone, one feels the air become denser, as if time were slowing down. Perhaps this is simply a psychological effect of the altitude and silence, but the sensation is so superficially real that it's difficult to ignore. Many have noted a sense of presence near the Intihuatana, as if the stone preserves the memory of the people who lived here. Some researchers have noted how water behaves around the monolith. During rainfall, puddles form around the stone in the same places, regardless of the direction of flow. This may indicate that the platform's surface was designed to channel water. Perhaps water played an important role in rituals associated with Intihuatana. Or, conversely, the builders created a drainage system to ensure the monolith remained dry during key observation points. There are accounts from travelers in the 18th and 19th centuries who claimed that at sunset the monolith casts a shadow resembling an outstretched hand pointing toward a distant mountain. This observation is unusual, as the shape of the shadow changes depending on the season. But sometimes the shadow does indeed take on a strange shape, as if the stone were trying to point something out. Perhaps the peak of that mountain was an important landmark for the ancient inhabitants, and the shadow served as part of their calendar. Intihuatana is often exposed to the elements, strong winds, heat, and cold nights. All of these could have eroded the stone over the centuries, but the monolith stands remarkably intact. Its surface is virtually free of major cracks, as if protected from destruction. Perhaps the builders chose a special type of stone with increased resilience, or perhaps the monolith was restored in ancient times, and its current appearance is the result of the labors of unknown craftsmen. At sunset, the stone's surface takes on a unique hue, from golden to purple. At these moments, Intihuatana appears almost surreal, as if the stone were changing shape with the sky. Some believe this is a characteristic of the minerals that make up the monolith. However, comparison with neighboring rocks shows that only Intihuatana reflects light in this way. This raises the question, perhaps the stone was brought here from another location. When a person ascends to the monolith, they feel the space around them change. The silence seems deeper, the air is denser, the light is brighter. It feels as if the Intihuatana is gathering the energy of the entire complex around itself. This feeling is difficult to describe, but many have noted a clarity of thought that arises near the stone, as if the place helps one concentrate. Today, Intihuatana remains one of the most enigmatic structures in South America. Scientists debate its purpose, tourists try to sense its power, and researchers continue to search for answers that still remain elusive. The monolith stands atop a mountain, having survived eras, the disappearance of an empire, and countless generations. And perhaps those who created it intended for it to outlive our own time. As a sign that time can be felt as well as measured, monoliths remain silent dots on the map of the planet and beyond. They have outlived civilizations, forgotten languages, and preserved secrets that remain undecipherable. Their shape, orientation, and silence speak of ancient knowledge hidden within the stone, still biding its time.